Hi, this is John Malank again with the Sacred Plant Healing Secrets Experience, episode number 2. We have a special guest today, Sebastian Cotte. I'll say he's a cannabis refugee with he and his family, but he's back in his I don't want to say home state because he's from France. So welcome. But Sebastian Cotte became actively involved in the field of medical marijuana in 2013 while seeking alternative treatments for his son Jagger, which has a rare terminal mitochondrial disease. And in 2014, with his wife Annett, they became medical marijuana or medical cannabis refugees that moved to Colorado to access safe and legal cannabis oil for their son Jagger. But now, with I'll let Sebastian tell his story. But they're back in. They actually lived in Colorado for 13 months, but they're back in Georgia. And so I'd like to welcome Sebastian to the show. So thank you, Sebastian, for taking some time to be with us today and sharing your family story.
Well, thank you very much for having me. I appreciate that.
Well, good. Let's just get right to this. I mean, there's a lot of information. We have a lot of families that have followed us, so I just want to let everybody know, and I should let everybody know. But ailments, whatever they may be, affect us all. They affect the brand new baby up to the geriatric and end of life families. And families, that you would never expect anything to happen, like what happened to my wife and I with Corinne. So, but if you'd like to share your story, Sebastian, so if you could tell us about Jagger's battle with mitochondrial disease and the steps that brought you into the Sacred Plant and where you are today.
Yes, absolutely. I'll be happy to. So Jagger was born in September of 2010, just a regular kid, no issues. He was our first kid. And about 3 months old, we found out when during a routine pediatric visit when he had a heart condition. So we were very surprised, of course. We had no idea where it came from. So we were kind of gearing up for that. It was very serious as we ended up in the cardiac ICU within a few hours of finding out about the condition. But we were able to go home after a few days. We did a few tests and we were able to go home right before Christmas. And everything was fine after that. I mean, Jagger was not eating very well. He had some failure to thrive, but he was, a lot of kids do that. Unfortunately, about 6 months old or so, he started losing some skills. So he started sitting up a little bit and doing, holding his head up. And within a couple of weeks, that was totally gone. And we had no idea why. We were in the hospital, in and out of the hospital for months. Nobody could figure it out until somebody say, I think we need to test him for mitochondrial disease. So we did in the summer of 2011, we tested him for mitochondrial disease with a muscle biopsy. So it's where they take a little piece of his muscle from his thigh muscle and during surgery. And we found out late summer, we found out about early November, we found out early September before his first birthday when he has, in fact, a mitochondrial disease. But we didn't know which kind. Mitochondrial disease a very, very wide range. Pretty much what happened with mitochondrial disease is just when the energy, the mitochondrial, which makes the energy in your body, does not work properly for Jagger. So when he was an embryo, he didn't have enough energy to form all his organs. So he has a brain lesion, he has the heart condition, he has a lot of lungs issue. He has issues with his GI tract, he has muscle issues, and he also gets very, very tired very quickly, which can also make things worse. So we know he had mitochondrial disease. We start putting him on vitamins and supplements when they give for mito. And a few weeks later, he had some really bad stomach issues. So we took him to the hospital. And during that stay at the hospital, he screamed so much in pain when he actually stopped breathing and he coded. So right there, the team just rushed to the room, and they had to actually resuscitate him in front of us, which is pretty dramatic for a new parent, your 1-year-old kid. And they got him intubated, they got him back to breathing, they put him in the ICU, and when in the ICU, they did an MRI. And in the MRI, we found out he had lesion, bisymmetrical lesion in the basal ganglia part of the brain, which correlate with Lee's disease. So on December 1st, 2011, that's one of the dates you never forget, we were sent home on hospice and told when Jagger just have, probably a few months, maybe a few maybe a year at best. We also found out by doing research that Lee's disease, that's what he was diagnosed with. It's a very progressive terminal form of mitochondrial disease. If you get the diagnostic before the age of 2, 95% of the kids do not make it past 4 years old. So that's, obviously for a brand new parent, we're first kid, we know anything about being parent. We go home with a 1-year-old in December and tell her, knowing or thinking that was probably going to be his first and his second and only Christmas. So it's definitely a shock. But as parents, special need parents, you do a lot of research, you look at a lot of things, and we were able to get him an FDA-approved drug in Ohio. Unfortunately, during one of the trips there, we almost had to have an emergency landing on the plane because he stopped breathing and had a breathing issue in the plane. So after that, we kind of got blacklisted from flying commercial with him. So we're not really allowed to fly anywhere. Which would explain why we drove to Colorado, but we'll talk about this in just a minute. But so we had this kind of FDA-approved drug that kind of helped him a little bit for a few months. Then he really plateaued. We petitioned the FDA for an increase. Nobody has done that before. We were allowed a drug increase, so that helped him again a little bit, but that's kind of plateau again. And it was probably, around the end of 2013, we were left with really not a lot of options coming on to Jagger's 4th birthday in 2014, and his life, and what we were told was his life expectancy. And
it's not what you want to hear as brand new parents. I mean, you never want to hear this, but having a child and having to go through this, at age 1. That's not what you want to hear. And so this has been part of your life now for, what are we going on now? 7 years?
Yeah, Jagger just turned 7.
Yeah. And so, I don't want to finish your story, but I mean, that is pretty scary. So how many prescription drugs? I know you petitioned the FDA to see if you can up the doses and do that. So how many prescription drugs was Jagger on from, I guess, in the past 7 years, starting when you was diagnosed at 1?
So one thing about hospice, and a lot of people don't know, is when you get put on hospice, there's no limit. Right? They will give you whatever you need, as many drugs as you need, as high of a dose as you need, because it's all about quality of life and to make you comfortable in the few weeks or months that you have. So we were sent on December 1st, 2011 on hospice with crazy amount of drug for Jagger. And that increased and increased more, and the height as the most between the drug and the supplement, some of them were supplements, but the drug and the supplement, it was 22. 22 for 39 doses for a little baby. But what's important to know about that is what kind of drug we got. Yeah. Jagger was put on methadone, Valium, baclofen, Neurontin, morphine, Oxycontin before he was 2 years old. As much as we wanted. So as time, we had to give him 20 to 30 milligrams of morphine just to calm him down. Not to jump ahead, but we were able to definitely decrease that a lot when we started using cannabis for him.
Yeah, we went through this with Corinne and hospice, and so, like you said, they take as much as you want, And in my opinion, it's almost like human euthanizing. The more you give them, the better they'll feel, and then go to sleep. And so that was a very hard decision for myself and our family, and with Corinne, because she was very still coherent when we were going through this. And having a 1-year-old, they trust you and your wife, and so the stress that you and your wife and family must have been under of what you want to do for your child is. That's a tough decision. So I'm going to fast forward a little bit. And so when did you first start hearing about the possibilities of medical cannabis and sacred plant? Is it an option? And how long have you been in the States? Is your wife Annett also from France?
So I came here as an exchange student when I was 16 years old. So I've been here since 1993. And in 2000, now I got to remember this, in 2014, I believe, 2012, I actually became a US citizen. So that was a really, really proud day, and I was able to become a US citizen. My wife, Annett, is actually from Germany.
Okay.
But she lived in the US and she's 4 years old. She grew up in Manhattan. She became a citizen many years ago as her mom was a diplomat for the UN.
Oh,
So she's pretty much American from almost the beginning.
uh-huh.
Um, so yeah, and Jagger was born in Atlanta.
In Atlanta. And
Yep.
so with medical cannabis and then bringing it back to you and Annett researching, how did you get to the steps of even looking at medical cannabis as an option?
So it kind of, sometimes you get signs, right? And this kind of was a sign. I was just one day at home watching TV and I happened to be weed documentary from CNN on TV. And I'm looking at this and kind of now really paying attention, maybe doing some work or whatever, multitasking. And it kind of got my attention because we were talking about seizures and the little girl that was having less and less seizures. And Jagger had seizures as a symptom of his mito.
Yeah.
It's one of the symptoms is seizures. So I'm watching this, and the more I'm looking at it, the more I'm trying to pay attention. And all of a sudden, I'm really watching, and I'm like, wow, there might be something to this. This is interesting. So I tell my wife, and she's a little bit more scientifical than I am. I'm more in the business sales background, and she's a scientist of the family. She said, well, that's kind of interesting. And then I'm trying to thinking back, and I say, okay, why do I know about cannabis? I said, well, all I know, it's kind of from college, right? But I don't remember much from it from college, or when it was kind of a fun thing to do. But I said, could it really have medical properties? So one thing that almost every special need parents and patients have in common is that when you're looking in something, the research we do is better than the FBI or CIA will do on anything.
Totally.
There's nobody that research like a special need parent or a family member when you have a sick family member. So I started researching this. I started looking into this. I was very involved in the Mitochondrial Disease Foundation and group in Georgia. I'm actually one of the ambassadors. So when people get a new diagnostic of mitochondrial disease, they send them to me so I can give them the patient point of view and kind of what to expect. And a couple of the mito parents reached out and they saw the documentary too. And we were like, wow, maybe we need to try this. So we actually founded a small group on Facebook, Mito for Cannabis for Georgia. And so we can exchange idea and exchange research together. And we kind of keep on finding, we were not finding really anything on mito itself and cannabis, but we're finding on that it could help a lot of the symptoms of mito, the muscle pains, the seizures, the cognitive issues. A lot of mito kids lose eye traction, or they're not really aware of their surrounding. And we keep finding that cannabis could possibly help for that. So that's kind of what happened. I was just watching CNN, and then I done a lot of research and with other parents, and decided that was probably a good option for Jagger at some point.
Good. I don't know if you know the story of Cash Hyde. Cash Hyde, yep. He's a dear friend of ours, and we're great friends of the family. But Cash Hyde was the youngest legal medical cannabis patient here in the United States, and he was actually the first youngest and legal medical cannabis patient in the United States. And so he paved the way as a pioneer of parents looking at medical cannabis as an option for children. And it was sad because back then in 2010 he was diagnosed, and he actually beat his brain tumor twice. You had CNN, you had Good Morning America, you had Anderson Cooper, all these big network television stations were contacting them for an interview. And they said, we'll get back to you on a time. I said, great. And so a day, 2 days go by, and they call back and they say, I'm sorry. And everyone canceled on them. Everyone canceled on them because I guess the higher ups in the network were saying, we can't talk about medical cannabis in pediatrics. Fast forward now, it's on every day and every channel, so they paved a lot for this. Cashy ended up passing in 2012 at the age of 4. And he actually, his last night on Earth was at Crintoniz's place in Montana. So that family is just near and dear to us, and they're continuing on helping families and giving back and educating. And so, they're back probably when you and your wife were doing a lot of research, you probably saw a lot of stuff on cancer.
Yep.
Pediatric cancer. And so mitochondrial, it's a very rare disease. I think, what is it, less than 20,000 have it. And can you pronounce what Jagger has? It Leigh?
It's Leigh, Leigh, Leigh. Leigh's disease,
which is even rarer than the typical mitochondrial.
Yes, Correct. That's very rare. There's actually numbers saying that there's about maybe less than 4,000 people born within the U.S. every year, out of 4 million births in the U.S. a year. So it's very rare, very rare, and very progressive, unfortunately.
Yeah. So when you and Annett took the step of saying, let's do this as a family and research medical cannabis. Now you're in an illegal state. You're in Georgia. So I'm certain you said, great. What do we do now? Where do we go? Were you able, I mean, it's not something you can go to your doctor and say, hey doc, check this CNN report that we'd like to try this. And I'm certain he or she were like, where do you go? I don't know where this is. So can you tell me, one, what was going through you and your wife's mind? And then two, what was your next step? Did you automatically go, Colorado, we have to go? Or did you know that, you had to find out some options and Colorado was your option?
So pretty much at that time, I also only knew as a first about CBD, right? And so as I was doing the research, I found out that there's much more than CBD, but CBD was kind of the big hype after the weed documentary. So what we did is we joined with another group and we created a group of parents and we lobbied the legislation in 2014 in Georgia. When we were not able to pass a bill in 2014, Georgia legislative session is what we call a part-time session. So they only work 40 days a year. So by pretty much end of March, early April, it's over. And if you don't pass a bill, you have to wait till the next January.
Wow.
Yeah, so we didn't pass a bill by April of 2014. So now we were left with like, okay, what do we do? So I told my wife, I said, I think we might have to move. So I actually took a week from vacation of work. I flew to Colorado. And I talked to growers, I talked to doctors, I talked to parents, and I just kind of research. I was in a hotel in the morning, I got a rental car, I was driving all around town talking to as many people that would listen to me. Yeah. And really quickly, within a couple of days, I was like, yeah, we just got to do that. So I actually remember flying back home on the plane home, and I was just like, okay, now I got to sell my wife on this, right? But I'm like, okay, I'm a sales guy. That's what I do. I've been doing sales my whole life. That's all I know. So I say, if I can't sell her on this, then maybe I should look for another job, right? But right away, she was also okay. She's like, yeah, I think we need to do that. So we start talking to the doctors because Jagger was on hospice, still on hospice, but because Jagger's on hospice, it's a little bit different. So we told the doctor and they were like, well, you should try, potentially. But here's the problem. You can't fly. Because remember the thing about we're not allowed to fly anymore? They were like, he's not going to survive the trip, the driving to Colorado. It's about 50-50. He won't make it to Colorado.
Oh, my gosh.
So that made the decision a little bit harder. But at the end of the day, we didn't have a lot to lose. We know that if anything were going to happen in Georgia, it was not going to be before 2015. So August of 2014, we packed up the car and we drove to Colorado. And I can tell you that I've done a lot of challenging things in my life. I mean, coming to the US at 16 years old without speaking a word of English by myself was pretty hard. That was nothing compared to that trip to Colorado. Yeah. It was 6 days of hell. Honestly, there's no other way to put it. Jagger was in so much pain. Then we had to stop every 2 to 3 hours and spend the night in a hotel. It took us 6 days from Atlanta to Denver, which should be, a 20-hour drive. Took us 6 days. Wow. It was horrible. It was really horrible. But we got to Colorado in August of 2014. We got to see 2 doctors because that's what you got to do in Colorado to get the medical card. We got a medical card. And August 20th, it's another one of those dates you never forget. August 20th, 2014, we gave Jagger his very first dose of medical cannabis.
So we work with a lot of cannabis refugees, and it affects not only the child but the family. And if you had even immediate family here with your parents and grandparents, it would affect everybody because one, you're leaving your home, you're leaving your jobs, you're leaving your friends, you're leaving your support system, and you're in a situation. A lot of families will have the access where they can fly in for a weekend or a week and try it and see if it works, and then come back and bring the whole family out. So you never even tried medical cannabis for Jagger before you uprooted your life and drove 6 days. Is that correct? So you didn't know it was going to even work.
No, we didn't know. We didn't know it was going to work. We kind of took a little gamble, but again, with him being on hospice, we like, there's nothing else we could do. I mean, the only drug that could help him, we were on it, was the FDA approved drug trial. There was nothing else. There was nothing else in the horizon. There were no research coming. There were just, I mean, there's research, but there were nothing coming in the horizon for mito. So, you know, we said we have to try that. And we took a chance. We took a gamble. But yeah, it's very difficult. We don't have a lot of family here. So that part was kind of okay for us, but you know, we have a job. We just bought a house, which was a handicap-friendly house. Took us almost a year to find the house for Jagger, which was, you know, hardwood floor, wide hallway, accessible bathroom, because Jagger does not walk or even move at all. He has no muscle tone, so he's laying down all day or either on a wheelchair or on a bed. So we found this house. We love the house. You know, we were able to get to talk to our jobs, to our works, and told them we were going to be gone for 3 months, because that was actually his original plan. It was to go for 3 months. But it worked so well. Jagger did so well once we got to Colorado and put him on cannabis, and we ended up staying for 13 months. But yeah, it was very difficult. And there's a lot of factors people don't see. You leave your friend, you leave your work, you leave your family. If you go to church, you leave your church family. For us, one of the hardest things to do was to leave all these specialists. Jagger is followed by still a lot of doctors that knows him really, really well. And we don't have to reinvent the wheel. You know, they trust us with his care. All that changed because we were leaving medical equipment, you know, just things just as getting his oxygen tank or his suction catheter or his machine. They do that in Georgia. We had to find all that new stuff in Colorado. But mostly, more than, you know, to us, the biggest burden, to be honest, was financial. It's incredibly expensive how much Colorado costs, and it's even worse now, but people don't really know that. We had a savings account, and we took all of it out. And just to give a little bit of perspective, a house, a big accessible house in Atlanta, a mortgage was less than a small 2-bedroom apartment in Denver. Colorado is extremely expensive. And so my advice to anybody that is thinking about doing this is do your research, know what you're doing, know where you're going, but also save money. Sell things if you have to sell your things. I know it's not what you want to hear, but you know, this is going to be a life-changing decision, but more than likely this is going to be able to give your son, daughter, friend, husband, wife, an opportunity they don't have if you stay in a non-legal state. So do what you have to do. You know, we also got very lucky when we have programs in Georgia. We had some very people, very nice people to us, philanthropists that help us out financially a little bit. So we were very lucky to do that. State Rep Alan Peak was one of those persons in Georgia. He actually had a program to help, and he paid for our U-Haul and our move to Colorado. So we were very lucky to have a lot of help. But Colorado is very expensive, and the move is very expensive, and it's life-changing. So you got to be ready for that too. It's not as easy as just grabbing your bag and packing up.
So Sebastian, in regards to your, you know, that was my next question too about your specialist. You have families have their specialists already in their home, and now you're moving just to get this plant, this medical cannabis plant. So how did your doctors feel about you giving up almost on them and saying, hey, I need to try something here in another state? Back in, I believe it was 2014 when you were going through all this, we wrote a blog about Atlanta, or about Georgia, and the topic, or the title was Georgia, the pretend state. And we got a lot of coverage on that because they're saying, okay, families, you can try all the medical cannabis that you want, but you can't buy it here. You can't sell it, and you can't bring it in because it's all illegal. So how do you expect me and my family to try this? It's like saying, here, you have a driver's license, you passed your test, but there are no cars and you can't drive, but you can have a driver's license. And so we work with a lot of Georgians, and we get a lot of Georgians that call and say, help, what do we do? So back to your specialist that you've been with for quite some time. They, like you said, they know the machinery that you're on, the oxygen, and they know you, and they know Jagger. So when did you share with them we're moving to try medical cannabis and the sacred plant, or did you just say, we'll talk to you in 3 months?
So, well, a little bit of both. I mean, what happened is, by then, we already had one legislative session, and being one of the co-founders of the group of parents, we were on TV a lot. Jagger's story was shared a lot about one of the kids that could be helped by cannabis. So a lot of the doctors already knew when, we were going to do that. A lot of the doctors that know us also know that my wife and I are very stubborn when it comes down to Jagger. So just because we couldn't pass a bill in Georgia doesn't mean we're going to give up. And doesn't mean we're going to stop. But yeah, some of the doctors were just, like, well, I don't know anything about this. Some of the doctors were like, that is not going to work. And then some of the other doctors were just like, well, he's on hospice, which in that case, I guess it was a little bit of a silver lining, because they're like, you got nothing to lose. So if it was my kid, I'll do it too. So we got a little bit of everything. But I know when I'm talking to a lot of parents here in Georgia and around the country, that is not always the case, especially if the kid is not a hospice patient. Doctors are now it's changing. It's slowly changing, thanks to you guys and a lot of the education, a lot of the program out there. It's slowly changing. But I get a message probably on a weekly basis from a parent somewhere in the country saying, my doctor won't do it. What do I do? Yeah. And my only advice is you get two options. Just get some documentation, bring them some information, send them to us. Very often I send them to watch a sacred plant. So get that for them, get them to watch it. Or I say, change doctor. That's kind of the only two options you got. You either talk your doctor into it or you change doctor.
We hear that with patients at all ages. All ages. We speak to parents with pediatric, and we speak at retirement communities, and the seniors are asking their doctors about medical cannabis, and they hear that too. One, I'm gonna act like you never asked me that question, is what they've heard. Or two, if you ask again and I hear that you try, I'm gonna ask you to get another doctor. And I had this one 85-year-old lady. I said, "What'd you do?" She goes, "I fired my doctor after 30 years." And so it's the same thing with you. So, you living it. One, have it with your child, but also being a cannabis refugee, what obstacles did you and your wife encounter when becoming a legal patient in a legal state?
So pretty much what we had to do, and again, it's a little bit different with Jagger because he's so handicapped. We can put him on the plane, we can put him on the car. He doesn't talk. So we had to be super prepared. Everything we do, we have to just research and be really, really prepared. So actually, I went back to Colorado after that first trip, and I looked for an apartment. I was there for 3 or 4 days. I found something, and then what I did is I got a U-Haul with some of the staff, and I went there first. And I brought I rented. We got the apartment. I got the apartment. Then I started putting bills, electricity bills, and all that stuff. So we could be a resident as soon as we get to Colorado. Yeah. I could go get a Colorado driver license. So we did all that stuff. I drove a U-Haul truck to Colorado, moved all the stuff in the apartment, flew back home, and then we got in the car and drove with Jagger to Colorado. So it was definitely a process, definitely a difficult process. But by the time Jagger got to actually Colorado, I had a Colorado driver license, and we could right away go to the doctor. I was already a resident of the state.
Gotcha. So when you did become a resident of the state, you did that. And I know when you first went on a trip, you did your research, and so did any of the doctors know about mitochondrial disease as well as Lay disease? And treating pediatrics with that. And one, you're also dealing with Jagger on hospice. Did you run into any doctors that were, it's too much? Because I have heard doctors, one, that want to shy away from pediatrics, but also two, at all levels of age, when you hear it on hospice, they kind of say, back off and say, this is not I don't feel comfortable working with a hospice patient. This has happened to us with my father-in-law. He was given weeks to live. He was on hospice, and I asked about medical cannabis. It was in our lifestyle, and his doctor said, "I know nothing about it. You have weeks to live. Good luck." And our outcome is he's still alive. And he's had 10, 11 scans, and they've all come back with no evidence of recurrent disease. So did you run into any doctors that were kind of hesitant, one, on working with a family that has a young pediatric child, but also two, who someone's on hospice?
Not really. We kind of got a little bit lucky on that. We went to see a doctor that does a lot of pediatric cannabis cases. Now, he did not know anything about mitochondrial disease. That was for sure. But Jagger qualified under seizures in the state of Colorado. And actually, to this day, to today, the only state in the country that has mitochondrial disease as a qualifying condition is Georgia. And that was actually put in the bill for Jagger.
Wow.
So actually, Jagger is the very first legal mitochondrial patient for medical cannabis in the US.
Wonderful.
Yeah, so that was, but in Colorado, we qualify under seizures. He had a lot of bad seizures. But yes, we did get a doctor that did not know much about mito, and he said, you can try it if you want to try it. I'll sign off on it because of the seizures, but I cannot tell you anything about the mito. Our biggest obstacle, honestly, was hospice. And even it wasn't that bad, but there's only one hospice, pediatric hospice in Denver. So if it were not going to take us because of the medical cannabis, we would have been in really big trouble.
Yeah.
But they were very understanding. But they were still very hands-off. They were like, we don't really want to know. Do it. Do what you got to do. We don't really want to know what you're doing, what you're giving. We just want to make sure you're doing your research. It's not going to interact with some of the other medication, 19 some medication Jagger is on at that time. But they were very hands-off, but they were okay as long as we kind of just did it and didn't talk about it.
Gotcha. So back to your doctor, because we get this quite a bit as well with drug-to-drug interactions, and you just brought that up. So did your doctor know about the 19 other medications that Jagger was on and the combination of the cannabis? And we can talk offline about this doctor, because I think formulations and dosing are very important. So did he or she, were they up to date on formulations and dosing, or was it kind of a trial and error with Jagger?
No, it was really trial and error, and it was honestly just us doing research and finding about the P450 liver enzyme on the internet from our parents. And unfortunately, I think we're still there a lot in this country, where the information is coming from parents, from support group, from organizations that are helping patients. We do need definitely more doctors to know about this, to know about possible interaction, to know about possible side effects, because even if there's very few of them, they're not as bad, not even close to being as bad as side effects you would get from regular pharma. There's still things you need to be careful and know about and watch. But no, it's better now, I can tell you that, but it's still, we were kind of left on our own back then, and just doing our own research to find out about this.
Did you have any horror stories where, oh, that was too much, don't want to do that again?
We really haven't. We did have some strain that did not work at all for him.
Yeah.
That actually made him a little bit worse, if you want to call that.
Yeah.
But we did not have some major horror story with the medication or nothing like that. We were very lucky, but we were also being very, very careful.
Yeah. So I know 2014 to the present day, testing has become very important as well. And so were you and your wife, did that ever come up? How do we know that the medicine we're giving Jagger is safe, is tested? I'm certain at first you didn't think about that. And of course now, being a veteran in the industry, there's quite a few things that you would look for before putting it into your child. So did that ever cross your mind back then when you were so new and scared virgin parents, so to speak?
Oh yeah, absolutely. Especially because Jagger immune system is very, very compromised. So if we were to give him something with E. coli or mold or yeast or something, we could be in very, very big trouble.
Yes.
So that was very important to us. We also got lucky, or maybe we just, maybe we provoked the luck by doing our research, but we found, somebody, Jason Cranford, I don't know if I can say his name, but Jason Cranford in Colorado, that made Hades Hope, and that was a tested product. So we started with that, and we know we had labs with it. So we know by my research that I wanted to see, what kind of extraction method it was. So if it had any solvent in it, I wanted to see a microbial test result. I wanted to see a pesticide and all that stuff. But again, it was kind of left to me doing the research and just finding somebody like that. But that was definitely a worry, especially on the microbial. If I were to give yeast or mold to Jagger, I mean, that could have catastrophic results. So I was very worried about that, to be honest. Yeah, and I was very lucky when I found somebody that had tested medicine right away for us.
Good. I mean, that's what I was getting at in regard to immune compromise, especially in Jagger's condition. And so with the mold, pesticides, metals, fecal matter in a lot of cases as well, and they can't jeopardize any type of illness, but most certainly like the mold on the ingesting. So back to that, and I know we're gonna have a lot of people contacting us because a lot of people still think the only way to consume medical cannabis is via smoking. And so can you share, was it an oil, was it a tincture, was it a sublingual dropper, was it vaporization, or was it smoking? Can you share that with our followers today?
Yes, absolutely. So Jagger's case is a little bit particular because he cannot have anything in his mouth. Anything that go to his mouth end up in his lung, and he end up with aspiration pneumonia, which could kill him. And he had about 7 of those already in his life. So those are very dangerous. So if it's maybe one drop, like a rescue something, we could potentially put it in his mouth and rub it on his gum. But his everyday cannabis that he takes actually go to his G tube. So it's an oil that we mix with formula. Because it works better with the fat for absorption, because CBD and a lot of the cannabis is fat soluble. And we put that in his feeding tube directly into his stomach. So he goes directly into his stomach, and that's how he gets his cannabis every day. We also use topicals when he has a really bad day for his muscles, but his daily regimen is going to his feeding tube.
Gotcha. And that's what the Hides did with Cash. They were doing in his feeding tube as well. And they even went to when Cashy got out of the hospital, and that's a whole other story, but they were also juicing. And so have you tried juicing leaves and putting it, doing it that way? But I know it can he swallow today?
No, he still cannot swallow at all. We did try a little bit of juicing when we lived in Colorado, when we actually had access. Actually, in Colorado, I was legally allowed to grow some plants. So I had a few in my closet, had a few plants growing for Jagger. If needed. It's much more complicated than people think, and especially when you have a special need kid. It's a lot of work, checking your plant, checking your pH, making sure everything is correct, then drying and extracting and trimming. It's a lot of work for special need parents. So to me, it's better left to the professional. It was an enjoyable experience, but it was a lot of work. But because of that, we were able to have, so we did try to juice a little bit with him, and we just put it directly in his tube also. As well. We haven't seen a lot of difference in the juicing, but it's not because of the juicing, it's because actually Jagger does not respond very well to THCA, which would be, he responds much better to CBD, CBN, and THC. So we were able to juice, but Jagger was not responding very well to the juicing, mostly because of the cannabinoid.
Gotcha. And you bring up a good point. A lot of people after that CNN documentary, everyone thought the golden portion of the plant was CBD. So everyone went CBD happy. And still to this day, everyone's going CBD happy. We get a lot of calls, and I'm certain you work with a lot of families saying, I need CBD, I need CBD, I need CBD. But that was you made a good point about THC. So Jagger. So a lot of people think CBD is the medical portion of the plant and THC is a recreational portion of the plant. And that's not the case. And so can you share a little about the formulations of THC and CBD that Jagger's using and the success that you're having with that?
Yes, absolutely. And yes, I get that. Honestly, probably on a daily basis. It's like, oh, THC is bad, THC is bad. I can tell you THC is not bad. You know that. But I want to make sure everybody that's watching today knows THC is not bad. So we started with Jagger with CBD, with a Helizope CBD, which is a 20-to-1 CBD to THC ratio. That's the first thing we started with. Right away, within a couple of days, we saw cognitive improvement. We saw Jagger having better eye traction, looking at us again, being more aware of his environment. And for the first time in years, he actually smiled back at us. So right there, we were like, you know what? If nothing else happened, the hell that we went through to go to Colorado is still worth it, still a win because he smiled again. And I know it's hard for people to understand, but if you have a kid that smiled before and for 2 years never smile at you, and you see him smile again, I can't even explain the feeling when we had that day. It was just, I get chills right now just thinking about it. It was a little overwhelming, but it was, right now we knew we made the right decision. So that was the first thing we saw. And as we went on, a few months after that, we added THC to his regimen. And what we did with excuse me, what we did with the THC is we used an oil also, and it was full spectrum oil. So it was, it was the whole thing with THC has CBN, he had a little bit of CBG, some of the other cannabinoid, but we used that for his muscle pain, and that worked really good. But actually, the best seizure control we end up getting is when we added a THC to the CBD. We had a little bit of seizure reduction with the CBD, but when we added the THC, we got a better seizure reduction. And right now, we're still holding the seizure reduction years later. And we went from about 10 to 15 a day, depending on the day, to about 3 to 4 a day, with even a few seizure-free days here and there. Not every day, far from it, but maybe once a month we get a day here where we have no seizures. So that was great. Great for that. And then a little bit later on, we added CBN at night to help him sleep for his sleep issue. Yep. So right now we're using CBD, THC and CBN, all from the same guy, Jason in Colorado, all tested, all lab result. But the one thing that people need to understand about this and need to see is that we reduce the seizure, but we reduce the pain. And to see your kid scream in pain and there's nothing you can do about it, it's one of the most heartbreaking things you will ever experience in your life. And sometimes he scream for 5 minutes, sometimes he will scream for 2-3 hours. And we will give him 15, 20, 30 milligrams of morphine and not be able to stop him to scream. And he will only stop when he exhausts himself and fall asleep. He used to do that, and that's just really heartbreaking. And this mitochondrial disease can break down, you have lactic acid in your muscle. You can have a lot of horrible muscle pain, kind of like a constant cramping when you can't fix. And Jagger was going through this, but Jagger doesn't cry. He doesn't have any tears. So he only knows how to scream. So he was screaming for hours. And I can tell you, then, with cannabis, we reduced those episodes for about 90% once we added the THC. And as of today, Jagger is 100% off the Oxycontin and about 95% off the morphine. And
so happy to hear. I now I have chills.
Yeah, and if you know anything about those drugs, and it's so on TV every day, opiates, people dying from it. If you know anything about those drugs, if you can get off of those drugs, it's amazing. And even if you can just reduce them, the side effects of those drugs are horrible. And again, come back to being on hospice. It doesn't matter how much I'm going to give you. I'm going to give you enough for you to fall asleep or, God forbid, pass away in your sleep, because I want you to feel comfortable. I want you to stop having pain. So they would give us a crazy amount of it, and he would mess up with Jagger. He was like a zombie. He would slow down his intestinal tract. He would just, it was just a horrible thing for him. So to be able to get him off the oxy and almost entirely off the morphine, it's been a blessing than, something amazing than I can't even describe.
Yeah, boy, oh boy. So with this whole journey that you've gone through and having some success at the end here, cannabis has now become your life. And you've not only become an activist, but you're back in Georgia trying to pass laws for other families that are going through this or don't have to go through this and don't have to move. Can you share some of the milestones that you've hit? I know there's a federal case that you're involved with. So if you can touch up on that as well, on just helping in education. I think education is so important, but educating the lawmakers. I mean, this is what we've done for years. I think education at the legal and government level, at all levels, local, state, international governments, is so important. This is what Corinne and I have done for years. And before you draft these laws, learn about what laws you're drafting, like the CBD only laws. You made a perfect example. The CBD only laws don't really benefit who the CBD laws were designed for, and it's a perfect example with Jagger. We've seen that with CBD. CBD is wonderful, but add a little THC, and I've always said 75%, but for you to say 90% improvement by just adding a touch of THC, the outcome, and I think, again, having these laws, these CBD only laws passed, that really aren't benefiting who they're designed for, and they're not benefiting the pediatric cancer patients. And that's sad. And we know a lot of families that live in a legal state, live in a CBD only state, and they have 2 children. One has seizures, which is a legal patient, and the other child has cancer, which is an illegal patient. So I cut you off there, but if you can share what you're going through with the federal case and you becoming an activist, and I think our viewers would love to hear that as well.
Yeah, absolutely. The way I always look at it is I didn't ask for this. I got put in this situation just because by necessity, but I never asked for this. And now then it's been such a blessing for me and my family and Jagger. I'm trying to do my little part and repay by talking about it as much as I can, by educating people, by seeing, trying to pass laws. It's just kind of my way to pay back the plant that is giving, if I gave Jagger, at least already 3 years past his life expectancy, 3 years, then I just, every day is a blessing because of that. But yeah, so we started the Georgia's Hope group by joining a few other parents group in 2014, early 2014 in Georgia, and we could not pass legislation that year. But looking back at it, it was a CBD only for seizures legislation anyhow. So it was probably a blessing we didn't pass it, because we came back the next year in 2015, and when we live in Colorado, so I was actually flying back and forth at least 2 times a month, if not more, to lobby in Georgia. So it was very tiring, but I know I had to do that. And we had a wonderful group of parents, and we were able to pass the Haley's Hope Act in 2015 that give us legal possession. And you touch about this, no legal access, but legal possession of anything over under 5% of THC. So we not really consider a CBD only state because we have a 5% THC, but we don't have access. So at the end of the day, you can give me 95% THC. If you don't give me access, it doesn't really matter. Since that day, we've been fighting for in-state cultivation and distribution. Unfortunately, we are going against law enforcement, which are very powerful in the state of Georgia and have the ear of the governor. And unfortunately, probably the next governor, since we have election this year, but we kind of know already who's probably going to win. He's not also a great guy on medical cannabis. So we've been fighting for that. We're trying to share our stories. And we're just trying to do advocating. And at the end of the day, I always say to all the parents I want to get involved, there is nothing more powerful to sharing your story because you speak from the heart. Tell how much cannabis changed everything for you. And don't even worry about anything else. Just share your story. And at some point you will meet a legislator, you will find somebody that is willing to listen and that might have somebody that died from something that could have been helped by cannabis, or that is going to something with maybe seizures in the family, of cancer in the family, and make them think about what if I was using cannabis. And if you can do that, you are more than likely be able to maybe pass legislation. The key, I always say, is doesn't matter which state you're in, find a champion of your cause. We got very lucky in Georgia with State Rep Alan Peake is our champion. Find a champion, somebody who's willing to listen, somebody that is willing to to put himself out there or herself out there to help. And Alan Peake's story was really quickly, he met Haley from Haley's Hope Act. He met the little girl Haley in the hospital, and he told us so many times, he said, when I walk into the ICU room and I see that little girl having seizures, the only thing I could think of is, she looked like my granddaughter. This could be my granddaughter. And he said, if she was my granddaughter, I will walk on glass to get this to her. And he has done that. And he has put himself out there and help us. And when we couldn't pass a bill, he actually started a non-for-profit to pay for families, Georgia families, to move to Colorado, including my family. And he's still there in the legislation fighting. But you got to find a champion. And if you find a champion, there's one there. It might be hard to find. He or she might be hard to find. But there is somebody in that legislation in every state that is going to listen, that is going to care about your story and about cannabis. So find that person and just work with them and try to pass a bill. But again, no CBD only if you can avoid it, because at the end of the day, it's not going to help that many people. Not want to give anybody legal advice, but you can get most CBD product probably shipped right now under the Farm Bill. It's probably okay. Again, I'm not a lawyer, so don't take my advice. But CBD is not that hard to get, right? The rest of the stuff is hard to get. The THC, the CBN, the THCA, that's where it gets challenging. If you have a CBD only bill, you can get that in your states. And again, Jagger is not an exception. It's more the rule than the exception. All full spectrum, all cannabinoids working together is going to work better. Jagger did great on CBD, but when we added that THC, it was night and day difference. And I know, John, you have thousands of stories like that. So again, don't fight just for CBD if you can avoid it. There's some exception to that. Obviously, some state that not going to pass anything, but try to file out for everything for the whole plant, for full spectrum plant. And very quick on the federal lawsuit. This is ongoing right now. It's kind of very exciting. I met some of the lawyers in New York back in July of 2017, and they heard of Jagger's story, and they said, we're going to take on Jeff Sessions, the DEA, the Justice Department. Would you be willing to put yourself out there, knowing that, we don't know the repercussion of this is going to happen, because you swing this federal government and you're going to piss off a lot of people. And I say, yeah, absolutely. Again, to go back about paying back and trying to help and try to get this more mainstream, because he helped us so much, trying to pay back for everything he gave us, gave my wife and I, and all the extra time with Jagger. I say, absolutely, without a doubt, I want to do this and I want to help. And that lawsuit was filed in the summer of 17. And we actually, we'd have oral arguments coming up. And we're very excited about that. We don't know what's going to happen, but the premise of the lawsuit pretty much saying that having cannabis on schedule in the CSA is unconstitutional. So we want to take it altogether out of the Controlled Substance Act. All the cannabis off the Controlled Substance Act, so people can use it all over the country. That's what the lawsuit, in a nutshell, is trying to do.
So you look at this as a human rights issue? having access. I think families should have access to medical cannabis or another option. We went through this, like I mentioned earlier, with my father-in-law back in 2011 with medical cannabis. His doctor knew nothing about it, but he said, "Go for it." And my father-in-law is a very humble man. He's alive, and we talked about, and I know you're part. But you mentioned Schedule 1, no medical value. U.S. government has a patent on medical cannabis as medical value, has medical uses. And so my father-in-law, he sat there. He's a retired dentist, so he's a thinker, and he does a lot of studying. But the same thing, he said, "How come no one sued the U.S. government for murder?" And he looked at us. United Patients Group did an article on that, and it got a lot of coverage. And people were saying, "Aren't you afraid?" And I said, "I'm not." We're just getting the information out. Why hasn't someone sued the U.S. government for murder? And my father-in-law is still alive. A lot of families that we work with who don't live in legal states, who don't have access and don't get a second chance for their child or their family member, it's tough. We were very fortunate. You were very fortunate that you had access, that you were able to become a refugee, and you're back home now. But it affects a lot of people, and a lot of people don't have the same type of resources that you and your wife did to leave and come back. So that must I know it affects a lot of people. So now with you back in Georgia, do you see any laws changing, or have you seen any laws changing? Has this helped?
So to answer the first part of the question about the human right, yeah, I absolutely believe it's a human right. I believe, if I'm back from my college day, right? Life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness is guaranteed in the U.S. Constitution, while my pursuit of happiness is to keep my kid alive. Keeping my kid alive is using cannabis.
Yes.
So it's my right, technically, under the U.S. Constitution to use it. I know I cannot get a court case on that, but that's how I look at it. I'm happy to keep my kid alive. When my kid is alive, I'm happy. My kid is alive in great part today because of medical cannabis. So yes, to me, it's absolutely a human right. And I've seen people, the bad thing, and you know that way too well, but the bad thing about doing what we do and advocating and helping people is you unfortunately see a lot of people passing away. Yeah. And the first year when we couldn't pass that bill in Georgia, before we passed the bill, we lost 2 kids to seizures. It's heartbreaking. The following year, we lost another one because we didn't have any access. Yeah. And, I honestly lost track of many kids we lost in Georgia and around the country because we have no access. And I'm not saying, again, cannabis will save everybody's life. It's not what I'm saying. But for many, it could help, and it could keep you alive, and it could give you a better quality of life. One seizure can kill you. One seizure. You can never have seizure before. You can have your first one and die. People don't understand that. You can have seizure for 5 years, 10 years, and still be okay. And then all of a sudden, one day, that one seizure can kill you. So cannabis can help with that. But yeah, so to me, it's a human right. To me, it's absolutely a human right. And it's something that I think should be legal. There is no reason for it to be illegal. It's not dangerous. If you do and take safeguard and know what you're getting, how you're getting it, how it's made, you can have very, very safe and clean product that can definitely help. And as far as Georgia, I don't know. I try to, when you got a kid on a hospice, you try to always be optimistic, right? Always see the best out of everything. But Georgia is going to be tough. Georgia still have a mentality. Unfortunately, we have this mentality now from the legislation that, oh, you have medical cannabis. We passed a bill. And I say, you did. It's a possession-only bill. So what happened if I go to Colorado, bring it back, and I got stopped over in Kansas, and they want to take me to jail? Do I tell them, I got a Georgia card? No, you can't touch me. I can't do that. And I actually asked the governor in his office directly, and the answer to me was, well, once you get back in Georgia, you're legal. And I say, I understand that. What happened before I get back to Georgia? That's my issue. And the answer to that was, once you get back in Georgia, you're legal. So they're playing, they're just being blind to it. They think they did us a favor, and they think they're done with it, but we're far from being done. And one thing we got over here, and it's not just a Georgia thing, it's something everywhere. Every parent, every special need parent, every patient, every husband, wife, granddaughter, anybody, even if you have somebody you care about that can use this plant, that plant is giving you hope. The power of hope is something that is untouchable. And as long as there's hope, as long as you have hope, then you have life. And, special need parents, they're known for one thing. is they don't lose hope, because the day they lose hope, it means when they give up. And especially when parents never, ever, ever give up. I'll give you that. We never give up. So we are going to keep fighting in Georgia. We're going to keep fighting around the country. We're going to keep fighting with the federal lawsuit. And it might take a few months, a few years, but we will get this, and I will fight as long as I can. Even when Jagger is gone, I will still be fighting. And this is not my life mission, and I never asked to be a part of this. I never imagined I'd be a part of this, but now I'm too deep in it, and I've seen it firsthand how much it can change people's lives. So I will fight on it until I can't fight anymore.
Yeah, and not to bring up a sad subject here, but you just said when Jagger is gone, can you share his life expectancy?
He's way past his life expectancy now. So we're taking. I know this is going to sound very, very cliche, but it's one day at a time. It really is one day at a time. And we enjoy every little moment. We just, any moment, every Christmas, every birthday, every little milestone, we enjoy, and we try to appreciate that, and take as many pictures and video as we can of him, because we want those memories. We've been doing a lot of art with him, with his fingerprint, making little frame of little animals made of his fingerprints. We're doing all that kind of stuff because we know at the end of the day, we have to be realistic. We know when Jagger is still on the hospice, he's still a terminal patient. We know when cannabis is not a cure for him, but cannabis gives him a longer life and a better life, which is, when you're on hospice, is really all you can ask for. So we know sooner or later. We almost lost him a few months back. He went to a septic shock, and we almost lost him, but we were, even the doctor was surprised that he's still alive. But after 3 weeks in the hospital on life support, we made it home. So we're very thankful and grateful, and every day is a blessing.
Yeah. Okay. How long was your drive home from Colorado to Denver, or Colorado to Georgia on the way home? Also 6 days? No,
on the way home was kind of. It was much better on the way home. We had one of a friend, great friend, that is a philanthropist, and he actually flew with his wife to Colorado and rented an RV. And he drove us back in the RV, so we were able to go longer because we were able to lay Jagger in the back. Yeah. Well, I know that's not legal, but hey, you got to do what you got to do, right? We did put a seatbelt on him. But believe it or not, something crazy happened. Jagger, before moving to Colorado, had, I believe, top of my head, 17 admissions in the hospital, so from age 1 to age 4 when we moved to Colorado. In the 13 months in Colorado, we were not admitted in the hospital a single time. Wow. On the way home, we got to Nashville, and he got so sick, we ended up having to go to Vanderbilt Children's Hospital, and we got admitted for 3 days in the ICU. So we in Colorado for 13 months. We leave Colorado 3 days after we gone from Colorado, he's back in the ICU. Wow. So the trip home ended up taking 5 days, but that's including 3 days in the ICU. So it was much faster if you don't count those days in the ICU in Nashville. And so, Sebastian, we have a lot of patients that have tried different types of application methods. One that we've seen is rubbing the roll-on or the ointment on the bottom of the feet for seizures. Have you ever tried that? Does it work? I've only seen a couple patients that have had success with that. We have tried it. I haven't really honestly seen a difference with it, but just like you, I've seen people that it works. Honestly, it's everybody's absorbing differently, so that's probably why it might or might not work in the topical, because we think that with topical cream when using for his muscle, sometimes it works, sometimes it doesn't work. For seizures, for rescue medication, right now there are nasal sprays on the market, which honestly can be great for instead of using Diastat, which is Valium, when you give rectally, that can suppress your breathing and make you stop breathing. A lot of people are having issue with with nasal rescue spray for seizures, to get kids out of seizures. So that would be probably my preferred application for rescue for seizure patient. Gotcha. And you mentioned a bit earlier about the legal case and what you're doing in Georgia. Can you help and share with any families out there and grandparents with their grandkids and parents and brothers and sisters that one live in an illegal state and maybe going through something like this with their loved one, their pediatric brother, sister, child, grandchild, and don't have legal access? Can you share some tips? I know you mentioned reach out to, find that golden nugget in the government that can
that you can share your story and hit a nerve with them. Can you share some tips for families that may be going through this right now?
Yeah, absolutely. Now, again, I'm not a lawyer. Don't take this for the gospel, what I'm going to tell you. But at the end of the day, especially when you get a kid on a hospice or a very sick kid, you have to do what you have to do. Okay, and I'm not saying anybody should break the law, but you got to do what you got to do. Depending what you do, don't talk about it. Now, that being said, yes, get involved. Talk to your legislator in DC and at the state level. Share your story. Reach out to the press. Ask to write a co-ed. For your local newspaper. Share your story. Again, the best advice is to share the story and advocate as much as you can, and just show people that are non-educated on cannabis, and cannabis is safe and it can really help. And if opiates is legal, there is no reason for cannabis not to be legal.
Yeah.
Opiates are much more dangerous than cannabis, and it's legal every day, and people die every day from it. I think we have over 90 people a day in this country dying from opiates overdose. It's ridiculous. It's avoidable.
Yeah.
And share your story. If you want to take another angle with legislators, something that is working right now, honestly, is also the financial situation. A lot of states having issue with their budget. So cannabis can bring money. That's mostly often on the rec side, but what it can do on the medical side, we just had a speaker in Georgia talking about this from the University of Georgia. He did a paper on it. It can reduce by billions of dollars if we were to make it legal in all 50 states. Excuse me. It could reduce by billions of dollars Medicaid and Medicare spending if people were to use medical cannabis instead of prescription drugs. That's not what the big pharma want to hear, so that information is not going to be widely available. But there's a published paper by the University of Georgia that show that. So if that's an angle you want to use that angle, then you can save money to the states. And now again, not money by taxing the cannabis in dispensary, money by saving Medicaid and Medicare funds. There's many angles you can take with this.
Well, I appreciate you sharing your story. I know the feedback that we had in the Sacred Plant docuseries with you and Jagger has touched a lot of people. And I want to thank you for taking the time to be on, the Sacred Plant docuseries, because, it reached a lot of people.
Well, actually, my dad's a doctor in France. So at first he was kind of like, well, I'm not really sure about this. I don't know much about it. And he's older, so he never learned about the endocannabinoid system or any cannabis in med school, because it was way before that. He went to med school before it was even discovered. But now he's seeing, he doesn't see Jagger very often, but you get to see the difference when you see him. And he's like, yeah, absolutely, go for it, do what you got to do. And unfortunately, my mom just went to breast cancer a few months back, and there were no way to get cannabis. So she went to the chemo and the radiation. She seems to be doing okay right now. But I really wanted to get her cannabis, but there was no legal access in France. And obviously I was not going to ship something internationally. It's too risky. So I really, really wanted my mom to use it during a cancer treatment, especially if she had a really bad side effect from the chemo. I know it would have at least helped with that. But unfortunately, I was not able to get her access to that. But they're believers now. They really are believers. And they're telling everybody, they're sharing that story with everybody. And every time there's a news report or a news clip or story about Jagger or like the Sacred Plant, they're always like, hey, look, my grandson. So,
Sebastian, I can't thank you enough for taking your time today and sharing your story and Jagger's story. And it brings a lot of hope. And like you, I always share with people, this isn't the golden ticket. I don't want to ever give anybody false hope. I personally have seen it work. You've personally seen it work. But hope is sometimes the only thing that a patient has to hang on to. And I know that firsthand, and I know you know that firsthand as well. So, but I just thank you, and knowing that Jagger is back to smiling, boy, that must be beautiful. And so I'm very happy for you and your wife and family, and I look forward to meeting you face to face one of these days as well. But again, I thank you. And is there anything you want to send out to our listeners today or our viewers today about Jagger and you and your wife and what you're doing?
Well, first of all, I want to thank you guys too, and thank the Sacred Plant and all you do. United Patient Group, all you guys do for everybody around the country.
Thank you.
It takes a village, but
Yeah,
we have a really good village.
we
So,
do.
so I'm very hopeful that it's even going to get better.
Yeah.
And no, I mean, all I want to say is, cannabis give us time that we never thought we'd have.
Yeah.
For that, I'm forever thankful. And it's not a miracle drug that going to cure everything, but in my case, in my wife and Jagger's case,
Yeah.
one single day past his life expectation is a miracle. So
Yeah.
we're going on over 3 years now. So we're just very thankful.
Well, good. And Sebastian, I just want to thank you and Annett for being brave parents and continuing with hope, as you mentioned, and fighting for a cause for Jagger and having the success that you're having with Jagger. So I appreciate you being on the Healing Secrets Experienced webinar series, and you were number 2 in our webinar series. And again, thank you so much, and we will see you soon. God bless.